The grand starship Sovereign's glory floated silently through the endless darkness of space. Inside the massive vessel, in a chamber that gleamed with polished metal and soft blue light, sat Empress Vela upon her throne. She had not walked for 13 years. Her legs had become useless, forgotten relics of a past that seemed like a dream now. Vela was once the most feared ruler in the entire galaxy. Under her command, the Calthari Empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. Billions of beings lived under her rule. She was strong, powerful, and respected by everyone who knew her name. But one terrible day changed everything. During an important diplomatic mission to a distant planet, an accident occurred. A building collapsed. Vela was trapped beneath the debris for hours before rescue teams found her. The doctors said her spine was damaged in ways they did not understand. The nerves that controlled her legs were broken beyond repair. At least that is what they believed. The greatest physicians of the Calthari civilization worked day and night to help her. They used advanced technology that humans could only dream about. They tried genetic therapy. They attempted cybernetic augmentation. They injected her with experimental medicines. Nothing worked. Nothing could bring back the feeling in her legs. After 6 months of failed treatments, Vela accepted the truth. She would never walk again. The doctors confirmed it with sad expressions on their faces. The Empress made a decision that day. She would stop fighting against her fate. Instead, she would learn to rule from her throne. A throne would become her world. Years passed. 13 of them. The Calthari people adapted to their ruler's condition. They built her throne in the grand chamber so that it was elevated high above everyone else who entered. This way she could still be seen as the supreme leader even though she could not stand. Servants attended to her every need. Advisors brought her reports from across the empire. She governed through command and will alone without needing to move. But inside, something in Vela had died. She remembered what it felt like to walk through the gardens of her homeworld. She remembered standing before crowds of 1,000,000 people, feeling their energy and their respect. She remembered the simple joy of moving her body freely. Now she could only remember. The memories made her sad. Her closest advisor was a stern woman named Helena. Helena had served Vela for 30 years, long before the accident. She saw how the Empress had changed. The fire that once burned in Vela's eyes had become dim. Her voice, once strong and commanding, had become quiet and distant. Helena worried about her ruler, but she did not know how to help. One day the Sovereign's glory received new crew members. They were humans from Earth, assigned to work on the ship's engine systems. The Calthari did not think highly of humans. They saw them as a young species not very advanced, still learning the ways of the galaxy. But humans were useful workers. They were strong and willing to do difficult jobs. One of these humans was named David. He was a mechanic, tall and muscular, with curious brown eyes and dark hair. David had worked on many different ships, and he had learned to observe everything around him. He noticed details that others missed. He asked questions when he did not understand something. He was not afraid to challenge the way things were done. On his 3rd day aboard the Sovereign's glory, David was called to the Imperial sector to repair a malfunctioning panel. The panel was located near the main corridor that led to the Empress's chamber. As David worked, he heard soft sounds coming from nearby. He finished his repairs and decided to explore a little. David walked down the corridor slowly, looking at the elegant architecture around him. The walls seemed to tell stories of power and glory. Then he came to a large entrance. Inside, he could see a woman sitting on a magnificent throne. She was tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her hair was long and dark. She wore robes that sparkled with jewels. But what struck David most was her face. She looked so sad, so tired, so trapped. David did not know who this woman was, but he knew she was important. He could feel it. He stood there for just a moment, staring. Then one of the guards noticed him and rushed over. The guard pushed David away from the entrance and told him he was not allowed in that area. David returned to his work, but he could not stop thinking about the woman on the throne. That evening he asked another human named Robert, who had been on the ship longer than him, who that woman was. Robert's eyes grew wide. "That is Empress Vela," he said quietly. "She is the ruler of the entire Calthari Empire. She is one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy." David felt shocked. Why was she just sitting there? Why was she not moving around? Robert explained that the Empress had been paralyzed for 13 years after an accident. She could not walk anymore. She would probably never walk again. All the best doctors in the galaxy had tried to help her, but nothing had worked. That night, David lay in his small quarters and thought about this information. Something inside him refused to accept that such a powerful being should be trapped like that. He had always been the type of person who looked at problems and tried to solve them. His mother had always told him that humans had a gift. They did not give up easily. They did not accept that things could not be changed. David made a decision. He would study the Empress's condition. He would look at her medical files if he could access them. He would learn everything he could about why she could not walk. And then he would try to help her. It might be impossible, but David had never been afraid of impossible things. The next morning, David began his quest to help the Empress. He did not know that his determination would change everything. He did not know that his refusal to accept the impossible would inspire others. He did not know that a simple human mechanic would become the most important person in the Empress's life. But David was about to discover all of these things. David spent every free moment studying Empress Vela's medical files. It was not easy. The files were written in complicated technical language. The Caltheri used words that David had never heard before. But he was determined. He spent hours in the ship's computer room, reading about her condition, looking at scan images of her spine, studying all the treatments that had been tried. The more David read, the more he began to see something that troubled him deeply. All the treatments were extremely complicated. The Caltheri physicians had tried advanced technology and genetic modifications and cybernetic enhancements. They had used machines and chemicals and procedures that David could barely understand. But none of it had worked. And David began to wonder why. David thought about problems he had solved in the past. Many times he had found that the most complicated solutions were not always the best solutions. Sometimes the answer was simpler than people realized. Sometimes people became so focused on using advanced technology that they forgot about basic, proven methods that had worked for thousands of years. One afternoon, David was working in the engine room when an idea suddenly struck him. It was so clear and so obvious that he wondered why no one else had thought of it. The Caltheri physicians had approached Vela's paralysis like it was a mathematical puzzle to be solved with complex equations and advanced machines. But what if it was not that complicated? What if her body simply needed basic physical therapy? What if her muscles and nerves needed to be trained and strengthened the old-fashioned way? David knew he was taking a huge risk when he decided to request an audience with the Empress. Humans did not typically speak directly to the Empress. It was not proper. It was not allowed. His supervisor warned him that he would lose his job if he made such a request. But David did not care. He believed so strongly that he could help Vela that he was willing to take the chance. When David's request reached the Empress's advisors, they were shocked and angry. How dare a human mechanic ask to speak with their ruler? Who did he think he was? Some of the advisors wanted to have him removed from the ship entirely. But Helena, the stern advisor who had served Vela for 30 years, thought differently. She saw something in David's determination that reminded her of the old Vela, the Vela from before the accident. Helena told the others to allow the meeting. Vela was surprised when Helena told her about the human mechanic who wanted to speak with her. In 13 years, hundreds of people had come to her with ideas and treatments. Most of them were forgettable. But something about this human intrigued her. She decided to allow the meeting, though she did not expect anything to come from it. David was nervous as he was escorted into the grand chamber where Vela sat upon her throne. The room was enormous and impressive. The walls were covered with images showing Vela's great victories and accomplishments. David felt very small in this space. But when he looked at Vela's face, his nervousness faded. He saw sadness in her eyes and that gave him courage. David bowed awkwardly, not knowing the proper way to show respect to a Caltheri empress. Then he spoke. His voice was calm and direct. Your Majesty, I believe I can help you walk again. The entire chamber fell silent. Helena gasped. The guard stepped forward, ready to remove David from the room. But Vela raised her hand, signaling them to stop. She looked at this strange human with new interest. How? She asked simply. David explained his theory. He told her about the Caltheri physician's complicated approach. He said that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. He proposed basic physical therapy combined with gradual strengthening exercises. He told her about methods that humans had used for centuries to help people recover from injuries. Vela listened carefully. She could see that David truly believed in what he was saying. She could feel his determination and his hope. Something stirred inside her, something that had been sleeping for 13 years. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten. It was called hope. She made a decision then and there. She would let this human try to help her. Over the next several weeks, David visited Vela regularly. He came to her chamber after his work was finished. He taught her exercises that seemed simple but were actually quite difficult. He showed her how to strengthen the muscles in her legs and back. He worked with her patiently, never showing frustration when progress was slow. But something unexpected began to happen during these visits. David and Vela began to talk about more than just exercises and medical treatment. David told Vela stories about Earth, about human history and human nature. He spoke about humans who had accomplished amazing things against impossible odds. He told her about people who had built civilizations from nothing, who had explored their world, who had even traveled to their moon with machines that were far less advanced than the technology she used every day. Vela shared her own stories in return. She told David about her homeworld, about the gardens where she used to walk as a young girl. She described the feeling of standing before crowds of millions of her people, feeling their respect and their love. She spoke about what it meant to be the ruler of an empire, about the weight of responsibility that came with such power. She told him things she had never told anyone else. David listened to every word. He was genuinely interested in what Vela had to say. He did not treat her as a broken ruler who needed fixing. He treated her as a person, as someone with thoughts and feelings and dreams and memories. This made Vela feel valued in a way she had not felt in many years. A bond began to form between them, a friendship that was deeper than either of them had expected. Vela looked forward to David's visits each day. David began to care deeply about Vela's well-being, not just because he wanted to solve a medical problem, but because he genuinely cared about her as a person. Helena noticed the change in the Empress. The sadness in Vela's eyes seemed less heavy. Sometimes she even heard Vela laugh. Helena realized that this human mechanic was giving her ruler something that no advanced medicine could give. He was giving her hope. After 3 weeks of consistent physical therapy, something remarkable began to happen. Small changes appeared in Vela's body. During one session, David noticed that her leg moved slightly when he asked her to try. It was just a tiny twitch, barely noticeable, but it was real. For the first time in 13 years, a muscle in her paralyzed leg had responded to her will. Vela felt it too. When David told her what he had observed, tears formed in her eyes. It was such a small thing, barely anything at all, but it meant everything. It meant that maybe, just maybe, the nerves in her legs were not completely dead. They were just sleeping, waiting to be awakened. David increased the intensity of the exercises gradually. Each day Vela worked harder. Each day her body responded a little more. Sensation began to return to parts of her legs that had been completely numb for years. She could feel warmth and cold again. She could feel David's hands when he helped her with her exercises. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. But progress was slow and uncertain. Some days were better than others. Some days Vela felt like she was making real advances. Other days nothing seemed to change at all. There were moments when she wondered if she was fooling herself, if all of this hope was just a dream that would eventually turn to disappointment. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a day that neither Vela nor David would ever forget. David had decided to try something more intensive than usual. He wanted to push Vela's body harder, to challenge her muscles more, to demand more from her nervous system. He designed a series of exercises that were far more difficult than anything they had attempted before. Vela was determined to succeed. She wanted to prove to herself that recovery was possible. They worked for an hour. Then 2 hours. Vela's body was sweating. Her muscles were trembling from the effort. David was encouraging her, pushing her, believing in her ability to do things that she herself was not sure she could do. But then something went wrong. One of the exercises caused a sudden sharp pain in Vela's spine. The pain was intense and unexpected. Vela cried out. David immediately stopped the exercise and helped her back to her resting position. The pain gradually faded, but something else had happened too. It felt like the progress they had made had reversed. The sensations in her legs that had been slowly returning seemed to have disappeared again. Over the next few days, Vela's condition did not improve. In fact, it seemed to get worse. The small movements that her legs had been making stopped completely. The returning sensation vanished. It was as if her body had gone back to where it was before they started, back to complete paralysis and numbness. Despair crashed down on Vela like a wave. All the hope that had been building inside her for weeks seemed to shatter into 1,000 pieces. She fell into deep sadness. She refused to see David. She told Helena that she wanted to stop the therapy. She said that she had been foolish to believe that recovery was possible. She said that the accident had taken her legs from her permanently, and no amount of trying would change that. Helena worried about her ruler. She could see that Vela was giving up, surrendering to the darkness that had been holding her for 13 years. The Empress barely ate. She spent her days staring out at nothing, lost in her own thoughts. But David refused to accept Vela's decision to stop trying. He could not bear to see the Empress give up when he believed so strongly that recovery was within her reach. He continued to work on finding a solution, spending long hours studying the details of what had happened during that fateful exercise session. David talked to Emma and Robert, two other humans who worked on the ship. He explained the situation to them and asked for their help. Both of them agreed immediately. They saw in David the same determination that Vela had shown, and they wanted to help their friend succeed. Together, the three humans adjusted the therapy protocol. They made it less intense but more consistent. They added elements from traditional human medical knowledge, combining old methods with new technology. They created a plan that was gentler on Vela's body but still challenging enough to create progress. One evening, David did something that surprised everyone. He requested another audience with Vela, and this time Helena granted it without hesitation. David entered the Empress's chamber and found her sitting on her throne, looking more miserable than he had ever seen her. David did not waste time with small talk. He spoke directly to her heart. "Your Majesty, I need to tell you something important," he began. "On my planet Earth we have a saying. It is a saying that humans have lived by for thousands of years. The saying is this: it is always darkest before the dawn. This means that the most difficult moments often come right before things get better." Vela looked at David but said nothing. David continued speaking. "Humans have accomplished many things that seemed impossible. We have split atoms and split the sky. We have traveled to our moon using machines that are far less advanced than the devices you use every day. We have built great cities and discovered medicines that save millions of lives. We do all these things because we are stubborn. We refuse to accept that things cannot be changed. We refuse to believe that something that seems impossible actually is impossible." David stepped closer to Vela's throne. "You did not accept that your empire should fail when others thought it would. You did not accept that you should bow to your enemies. Do not accept now that your legs should be gone. Do not accept that your body cannot heal. You are the Empress of the Caltheri. You are stronger than this setback." Something ignited inside Vela when she heard these words. It was like a spark of fire, starting small but growing larger. She looked at David and she saw something she had not seen in a long time. She saw someone who genuinely believed in her. She saw someone who refused to let her give up on herself. Vela took a deep breath. She made a decision in that moment. She would not surrender. She would try again. She would work with David and the other humans. She would push through the pain and the doubt and the fear. She would fight for her recovery with everything she had inside her. The following weeks were the most difficult and the most important of Vela's life. She threw herself into the therapy with a determination that surprised everyone around her. Every day she worked with David. Every day she pushed her body further than she thought possible. Every day she refused to accept that she could not recover. David modified the exercises based on what he learned from the setback. He made them gentler but more frequent. He combined them with massage therapy and heat treatment. Emma brought her knowledge of traditional human rehabilitation methods. Robert helped design special equipment that would support Vela's body during exercises without putting too much strain on her injured spine. Grace, a communications officer on the ship, heard about Vela's recovery efforts and wanted to help too. She brought Vela music from Earth, songs about overcoming obstacles and achieving the impossible. Vela listened to these songs during her therapy sessions, and they gave her strength when she felt like giving up. Slowly, gradually, changes began to occur again. This time the progress was steady and real. The sensations in Vela's legs returned more strongly than before. The small muscle movements became more pronounced. After 4 weeks, Vela could wiggle her toes on command. After 6 weeks she could move her entire foot. After 8 weeks she could bend her knee slightly. Each small victory was celebrated. Each new movement meant that more nerves were waking up, more connections were being made in her spine. David kept detailed records of every improvement. He showed the records to Vela so that she could see, in concrete numbers and measurements, that she was truly getting better. One morning, David arrived for their usual therapy session with a different expression on his face. He looked nervous and excited at the same time. "Today is the day," he said simply. Vela knew immediately what he meant. Today was the day she would try to stand. The medical bay had been prepared for this moment. All the special equipment was in place. Emma and Robert were there to help. Helena stood nearby, her stern face showing deep concern and hope mixed together. Even Grace had come, carrying a small device that would record this historic moment. David helped Vela position herself so that she could use a special support frame that had been designed specifically for this attempt. The frame was strong and stable, and it would help support her weight if her legs were not strong enough to hold her alone. "Are you ready?" David asked softly. Vela took a deep breath. She had been waiting for this moment for 13 years. She had dreamed about it. She had feared it. She had hoped for it. Now it was here. Yes, she said. I am ready. Vela gripped the support frame tightly. She focused all her concentration on her legs. She commanded them to lift her body. For a moment nothing happened. Then, slowly her muscles began to respond. Her legs trembled violently. They shook with the effort of supporting weight that they had not held in such a long time. But they held. Vela was standing. After 13 years of complete immobility, the Empress of the Calthari was standing on her own 2 feet. David's face broke into the widest smile that Vela had ever seen. Emma gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Robert cheered. Helena's eyes filled with tears. Grace recorded everything, making sure that this incredible moment would never be forgotten. Vela stood there for only a few seconds before her legs began to shake too much and she had to sit back down. But those few seconds were enough. Everything had changed. The impossible had become possible. Over the next few days, Vela practiced standing again and again. Each time she could hold the position a little longer. Each time her legs felt a little stronger. David encouraged her to try taking small steps while holding the support frame. The first step was the hardest. Vela lifted one foot carefully and moved it forward just a few inches. Then she shifted her weight and brought her other foot forward. It was awkward and difficult and slow, but she did it. She took a step. Then she took another. By the end of the week, Vela could walk the entire length of the medical bay using the support frame. By the end of the second week, she only needed to hold the frame lightly for balance. The strength was returning to her legs. The muscles were remembering what they had learned so many years ago. Then came the day of the grand ceremony. The entire crew of the Sovereign's Glory was invited to witness the Empress walking. The grand throne room was filled with Calthari officers, human crew members and servants from every level of the ship. Vela stood at one end of the long aisle. David stood beside her, ready to catch her if she fell. Helena walked a few steps behind them. The music that Grace had chosen played softly in the background. Then Vela took her first step down the aisle. The crowd was completely silent. Everyone watched as their Empress walked. Some walked slowly, carefully, with great concentration on each movement. But she walked. After 13 years she walked. The crowd erupted in celebration. Some cheered. Some applauded. Some cried with joy. The sound was deafening. David walked beside Vela, his hand ready to support her if needed, but she did not need it. She was strong enough now. Vela reached her throne and sat down. She looked out at the faces of all the people who had helped her and believed in her. Her eyes found David in the crowd, and she smiled at him with gratitude that could not be measured in words. That evening in a private room, Vela took David's hand. "You refused to accept what seemed permanent and impossible," she said quietly. "What? Why did you believe when no one else did?" David thought for a moment before answering. "Because being different is not a weakness. Sometimes being different is exactly what is needed. My people come from a young planet. We have not forgotten how to hope. We have not forgotten how to believe in the impossible. You taught your people to be logical and advanced, but maybe you also taught them to stop believing. I just reminded you both that belief is powerful." Vela squeezed his hand. She understood now. She understood what David had given her. He had given her hope. He had given her belief. He had given her back her life. 3 months had passed since Vela took her first steps down the aisle of the throne room. In those 3 months, everything had changed. The Empress no longer needed the support frame. She could walk freely through the corridors of the Sovereign's Glory without assistance. Her stride was confident. Her bearing was regal and powerful. She had returned to her full duties as ruler of the Calthari Empire. But something deeper had changed inside Vela as well. The experience of being helpless and then finding recovery had transformed her way of thinking. She saw the world differently now. She understood things that she had never understood before. Vela had spent 13 years unable to move, unable to act, unable to change her situation through her own will. She had accepted what seemed like a permanent condition. But then a human mechanic had arrived and refused to accept that permanence. He had refused to believe that things could not change. He had shown her that sometimes the greatest limitations are the ones we place on ourselves. This understanding had profound effects on how Vela ruled. She began to question decisions that her people had made simply because they had always made them that way. She began to consider new ideas and different approaches. She saw value in perspectives that were different from her own. One morning Vela called David to her private chambers. She had made an important decision, and she wanted to tell him personally before announcing it to the rest of the empire. David, she began, what you have done for me goes far beyond helping me to walk again. You have shown me that my people have forgotten something essential. We have become so focused on logic and advanced technology that we have forgotten how to hope. We have forgotten that change is always possible. We have forgotten that belief can move mountains. David listened respectfully as Vela continued. I have decided to make a formal proclamation. You will be elevated to the rank of Chief Imperial Innovator. You will have authority to propose new ideas and new ways of doing things throughout the entire Caltheri Empire. Your determination, your refusal to accept the impossible, your different perspective as a human, these are things that my people need. David was shocked. He had never expected such an honor. He tried to refuse, saying that he was just a simple mechanic, but Vela would not hear it. You are far more than a mechanic, she said firmly. You are a teacher. You have taught my entire civilization an important lesson. But Vela's announcements did not stop there. She had made another decision that was even more historic and significant. She called for a grand assembly of her government and made a public proclamation that echoed through every screen and speaker on every Caltheri world. For centuries, the Caltheri have viewed other species as inferior beings, Vela announced. We have seen ourselves as advanced and civilized while viewing others as primitive and unsophisticated. But I have learned that this view is wrong. I have learned that every species, every culture, every person has value and wisdom to offer. Today I am making a historic decision. I am establishing a formal alliance between the Caltheri Dominion and the human settlements in this region of the galaxy. The announcement shocked the galaxy. News outlets broadcast it immediately. Governments from dozens of different species began discussing the implications. The mighty Caltheri, who had always stood alone in their superiority, were now reaching out to form an equal partnership with humans, a species they had always considered young and unsophisticated. Some of the older Caltheri leaders were upset. They saw this as a betrayal of their traditional values. But many others, especially younger Caltheri, were excited by the idea. They saw opportunity in this alliance. They saw potential for growth and learning. David was asked to stay on the ship as an official liaison between the Caltheri and the human settlements. He accepted the position without hesitation. He could not imagine leaving Vela now, after everything they had been through together. Emma and Robert and Grace also received recognition for their help in Vela's recovery. They were offered positions of importance within the new Human Caltheri Cooperation Program. All three accepted, eager to build something new and meaningful. In the weeks and months that followed, the ship became a symbol of cooperation and understanding between two very different species. Caltheri and humans worked side by side. They learned from each other. They discovered that their differences, rather than being obstacles, were actually strengths. One evening, Vela and David stood together on the observation deck of the Sovereign's Glory. They looked out at the endless stars spread across the darkness of space. Vela walked beside David, moving freely without any assistance. Her stride was perfectly normal. No one looking at her would ever know that she had been unable to walk for 13 years. Do you remember when we first met? Vela asked softly. I was sitting on my throne, looking at nothing, feeling nothing, believing that my life would never change. I had accepted that I was broken and would always be broken. David smiled. I remember. You looked sadder than anyone I had ever seen. But I also saw something else. I saw strength underneath the sadness. I saw someone who had not truly given up, even if she had accepted her situation. Vela placed her hand on David's shoulder. Your species has a remarkable gift, she said. You refuse to believe the universe is no. When the world tells you that something is impossible, you treat that as if it is just a suggestion, not a law. You hear the word impossible and you smile and you try anyway. David laughed. Well, your species has vision and discipline and incredible intelligence. You can see the big picture. You can plan for the future. Humans are stubborn and determined, but we often do not know where we are going. Together, we balance each other perfectly. Vela nodded. She looked out at the stars again, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. Real, genuine, powerful hope for the future. She felt grateful for the accident that had brought her to this moment, because without that accident and the recovery that followed, she would never have met David. She would never have learned this important lesson. The future is bright, Vela said quietly. Brighter than I ever thought possible. David agreed. It is. And it is just the beginning. There is so much we can accomplish together. So much that humans and Caltheri can do when we work as partners instead of seeing each other as enemies or inferiors. They stood together on the observation deck, the Empress and the mechanic, the alien and the human, watching the stars shine brilliantly in the darkness. They had come from different worlds, different cultures, different species. But they had found something that connected them. They had found hope. They had found friendship. They had found the strength to believe in the impossible. And in that moment, looking out at the endless possibilities of the universe, both of them understood that their meeting had changed more than just one person's ability to walk. It had changed the course of history for both their species. It had opened doors that had been closed for so long. It had shown that when different perspectives come together with determination and hope, truly anything is possible.